You knew the operational side of like, all right, if this is in the store, here's what I've got to do.
Yeah.
But from there, how big of a learning curve do you think that was early on?
It took a year. I almost quit because there were some weeks that I didn't make any money because I ordered way too much and I didn't sell enough to break even.
Yeah. Regardless of what you have or what you earn, you're going to work to earn it. You're going to work to have it.
Absolutely.
And so that's one thing that you can't teach that you possess that I think is just kind of innately in all three of us. From a high level conceptual standpoint, adapting has just been a part of our lives from, early teenage years on with Dad passing away. How old were you when Dad passed away?
13.
So how do you think Dad passing away, looking back, changed the course of not only like your high school career, but like going into your early adulthood? How do you think that changed you?
Just had to grow up.
Yeah.
I was the man of the house then.
Yeah. You had to grow up quick. How do you think that helped you as a business owner, as a husband, as a dad, like all those things?
Just made me mature. Like decisions that 18, 19-year-old typically don't have to make. I had to make.
The Mark Bigg Show.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Mark Bigg Show. Super excited for our guest today, and I think you will be too. Last time we had my older brother, Josh, on the show, and you got to hear some stories from our childhood and how he has transitioned into his life as an entrepreneur and multiple business owner and those types of things. Super excited for my little brother Jonathan to be on here today. Obviously can't do a show with one and not the other. We come as a trio. So super excited to have Jonathan here today. Jonathan is he'll never admit up to this, but Jonathan's also a business owner. And a darn good one at that. Works hard. He's a great man. He's a great husband. He's a great father. So super excited to have you on and let the people hear a little bit from you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So Jonathan is the baby of the three, and all of his traits will present themselves hopefully to you today to show that he is the baby of the three. And so, early on with Josh, we talked about a story from high school where he got escorted out by the police. Trying to fight the whole student section of an opposing basketball team. So that was interesting. That was that dynamic. And the dynamic with you and I growing up was always oil and water.
Oil and water.
So we fought all the time. We beat each other up. Josh always played mediator for us. But now all three of us are tight, but Jonathan and I are tighter than we ever have been. And so I think one of the important things that we'll talk about today going into relationships and business and stuff like that is kind of putting your pride down and putting that to the side in different relationships, whether that be friendships, sibling relationships, all those things. They apply across the board. And I think part of that for me was putting my pride down to say, Jonathan's not trying to beat me because he wants to beat me. Jonathan's trying to beat me because maybe he looks up to me a little bit. And I think that's really where I matured as an older brother and as an adult and as a man, and really allowed our friendship to blossom into what it is today. So when do you think that shifted for you as to like, hey, we're oil and water, we fight all the time, we just beat each other up, and that's what we're good for each other is pretty much just fighting, to, hey, he's actually my older brother, he looks out for me, he's my friend too, and like he wants to help me as a man?
Probably whenever you went off to baseball. I realized that you wasn't there all the time, and we didn't see each other all the time, we didn't talk all the time, and we were kind of in two different stages of life. I was still in high school. You were going on to do your professional thing. And then I started... High school
acting a fool, by the way.
Very much. But I got it out of my system early. Haven't done it in a long time.
That's a fact. I tell people all the time that Jonathan is the best of the three, and Josh would agree with that too, even though he's not here to defend himself. Jonathan is the best of the three. We would always tell you that. And that's a fact. And I think that, as you've gotten older, the traits that you possess that really help you shine from a professional standpoint are really what makes you such a charismatic person, and people love being around you. And part of that is, number one, you care for other people before you care for yourself. You give people the shirt off your back, and you could not stand it if you felt like you had hurt someone's feelings or offended them or done something that, they would take in a negative light. And I think that's some of your, most positive features that you have, and that just comes out naturally. Also, you're hilarious, which hopefully will come out a little bit as we go along, but the pure entertainment side of it, I can't even put into words. But as you've gotten older and going through high school, how do you think from a baseball perspective, it's always like to relate these things back to sports into professionalism and into working life and all those things. How do you think as you got older? Because when I got cut from the baseball team, That was your senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
And just following along as good as I could while I was gone, and you're playing, because obviously we're both playing baseball, so they run at the same time. So I'm, following up with Mom on games. I'm looking at your stats online, all those things, but I'm not there to watch the games. It seemed to me as though your senior year was a big, dramatic improvement from not only your stats, but the way that your team played together, the way that you individually shined as a first baseman. Jonathan was a phenomenal hitter, played a great defensive first base, just like Josh did when he played. Unlike Josh, Jonathan played all the way through high school and was one of the catalysts for his team being a competitor year in and year out. So what do you think as you got older, if anything, aside from just getting older and maturing, changed the way that you performed from a baseball perspective?
I think I put more work in the off season from junior to senior year.
What do you think pushed you to do that then and not from maybe as a freshman going through sophomore and junior year?
I realized I was running out of time.
Yeah.
I wanted to really shine my senior year. College baseball was never – it was early high school. I thought I wanted to go play college baseball, but –
Did you think you wanted that like for yourself, or just because you had seen me go through that thing and thought like that's what I should do? Because one of the things that selfishly I always felt bad for you, you were a phenomenal player, but I felt like you always had these different expectations put on you from, surrounding teams, from surrounding coaches, from, just innate pressure on yourself, all those types of things, just because I had the career that I had. And I couldn't take that away, so I hated that. But I felt like that pressure was always on you.
It was.
Do you felt like early on you wanted that just because I had done that?
Probably so. Yeah. Just because I looked up to you and I figured that was probably the path for me if it was a path for you. But
because honestly, you had the ability to do so.
Probably.
You did. And so going from junior to senior year, did you have an inkling that like I may want to play college ball, or you're just like, this is my last run, I want to be as good as I can?
I think it was just, this is my last run. I just want to do as good as I can and perform the best that I can. Because I knew at that point I probably wasn't going D1, which if I didn't go D1, I probably wasn't going to go.
That's fair because, I had conversations with roommates of mine in pro ball, because independent baseball is still pro baseball, but it's not affiliated with the major leagues, or it wasn't at that time. They've done some restructuring, so that's different now. But at that time, you can still go play independently. You're getting paid nothing, but you're getting paid to play, but you're not affiliated with a big league team. And that was one thing that I always told myself: if I'm not in a affiliated league with a major league team, in the minor leagues, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. It's not worth the time. It's not worth the sacrifice. It's all that. And to your point, if it's not in your mind, if you were like, I'm not going D1, it's not worth it to me, that's fair, because anything past high school is a job.
Yeah.
You live it, you breathe it, that's all you do.
If you waste your time through your 20s, that's where you bust it and grind for a professional career.
Correct.
Like outside of baseball.
And I've seen so many of my former teammates that they just can't cut that tie, and they end up, they're 29 years old. And they never got to the big leagues. They don't have any professional experience. So they're a lot harder to go into the workforce at that point. Because they're almost 30 with no job experience. Obviously, a lot of places and a lot of people, especially if you're from a smaller community, they love athletes, they love pro athletes, all those things to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But that's such a realist way of thinking. So going into that, I thought it was a blessing for me because I got cut. That's a whole big thing to deal with. Regardless, I'd put my blood, sweat, tears into this thing, get cut, come home, being able to watch your senior year was awesome for me selfishly. And I thought that you just had such a phenomenal senior year. As you went through that, how do you think, do you think you changed mentally at all through that? Like, how does that translate? Do you think you took anything from that final senior year where your team was good, you played phenomenally compared to the years prior? Not that you played bad the year before, but it was a noticeable change into your senior year. Do you think you took any of that stuff that you learned, confidence, any of those things into your adult life?
Oh, absolutely. We had to adapt a bunch in my senior year. I think we didn't have a field, so we played at Hobson.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
So it was, the whole season was, you had to adapt to whatever. So as in business, you always have plans. You always should go this way, that way. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't.
Yeah, you're right.
So you got to have option B, option C. And I think that's really helped me from a business standpoint.
That's a great point because whether it be your normal business that you run, Jonathan's an independent distributor for Little Debbie. So basically that means he owns a territory and services that territory day in and day out. Certain stores, your big box stores, local convenience stores, all those things. So that means you're self-employed, which is no different than owning your own business. An entrepreneur, it's the same exact thing. So the things that you do day in and day out run, along the same course that I do, that Josh does, Spence, who we had on before. So along the same entrepreneurial lines that, you're not punching the clock 9 to 5, and it's all on you. You have to make sure that you're making the right decisions for you. That means you're forecasting sales, you're forecasting orders, all those things, which is a whole, different world for me. The business has been in our family for a while, so I'm familiar with it. But from an operational standpoint, what do you think is the most challenging thing for you about what you do day in and day out?
I will say, when I first started, it was just an opportunity. Is when Josh wanted to start fuel. I remember we were in Gulf Shores for Thanksgiving. We were in the ocean, and Josh mentioned if I would want to run it for him.
Because at that time, Josh had been running it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
So I was like, sure. And I had just gotten laid off from doing electrical work.
So backtracking a little bit, as you graduated, this was obviously not the path that you saw yourself taking, thought what you were going to do. When you came out of high school, what was your plans and intentions?
I honestly had no idea. I've always kind of wanted to be in business for myself because, if you remember, I always loved trucks.
Mm-hmm.
I said I wanted to own a custom truck shop.
Cowboys and Indians, and then trucks.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody that knows Jonathan knows that from like birth until like age 12, all you saw him in was like cowboy boots and a shoestring wrapped around with rags covering his man parts so that he looked like one of the Indians out on the range in the field. So
I was covering both ends. I had the boots for the cowboys and the loincloth and the headdress for the
loincloth,
Indians.
that's it. The man was ready. So you wanted to own a truck shop at first.
And then when I graduated, I worked for Faxons. Remember, I worked for Faxons that summer. I realized mechanic work did not want to do. So I was like, well, I'm going to go to school to be an electrician. Started with a company called B&R Electrical. Probably worked there for a year and a half. We did like factories and
big
industrial stuff. As I went to school, I still worked for B&R, and I went to school full time and still worked 50, 60 hours a week.
And that's one thing too that you can't, in my opinion, you can't teach. And that's one of the things I think, going back to our upbringing and childhood, is that regardless of what you have or what you earn, you're going to work to earn it. You're going to work to have it. And I think that was instilled early. And it's not like they just shoved it down our throats, but they led by example. They were always working. They were always there. They were always at all of our events. If they needed to, shift a work schedule to make sure that they could be at something, they did that often. I know Mom, as we were playing like basketball and baseball on the weekends, they'd get up, Dad too, but they'd get up and go, to work at 3 a.m. to work until they needed to take a break and leave, go to the game, whatever it was, and then go back to finish their shift, just to make those things work. But they always showed up. They always worked, and they led with, you're going to earn what you have. You're going to work for that.
Absolutely.
And so that's one thing that you can't teach that you possess, that I think is just kind of innately in all three of us. That's, I think, pushed you to some of the success that you've had at such a young age.
Absolutely. Also, another thing, I love that I never seen them argue one time. Mm-hmm. Not one time.
Yep. They kept that private.
I think that was just the coolest thing ever. So I didn't even know Mom was ever mad at Dad, or Dad was ever mad at Mom. I mean, I'm sure they were. Don't get me wrong.
Plenty.
But they never showed that in front of us.
Yep.
And I try to do that in front of my kids too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a respect thing.
Yeah.
On top of that, so you're going to school, you're working full time at the same time. Where does that lead you?
So that's a lot of Saturdays, a lot of Sundays. Where a bunch of my friends were going to do fun things. I would try to do it after I got off, but I had to make money while I was going to school.
Man also had an expensive truck hobby as well, so the man also had to make money for his truck.
And I'm glad I got over that obsession too. I have a nice truck, but I don't spend every dollar I have trying to make it look a certain way.
Man was getting wheel bearings and rims, and I don't even know the words delivered like every other day to the house.
I was an addict, and it all went away.
Obsessive personality. Josh brought that up in his thing too. The obsessive personality is another thing.
I'm very obsessive. If I listen to a song, I listen to it 100 times so I can
Sing
know all the words. Yeah. Sorry, where was you at?
So you're going to school, you're working full time. Where does that lead you?
So then he asked, I got laid off. He asked if I would want to do it. And I was like, sure, short term, while I go to school, whatever. Anyways, it turned into him opening fuel, him starting to do better. We both lived off of it for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years while he got on his feet, which at the time I didn't have any bills really. I had a truck payment, but I got to live with you. So.
It was a hefty truck payment.
I got to live with you.
I should have charged you rent. That'll come in the mail. I'll send you a bill for that.
Probably should have. You about kicked out of your neighborhood too.
That's a whole other story.
It's all right. So we both made it work, and obviously he took most of it just because he had family and Blakely and other bills that he had to pay. So that was fine with me. And then one day he was like, "Hey, you can take a little more from it. I'm doing a little better." And then I think he did it 2 or 3 times, and he was like, "Hey, I don't need it no more, so it's all on you." But at first, I had never ran a business.
Yep.
I'm not saying I was bad at it, but it was just kind of like throw you to the wolves type.
Because the positive thing to it was that Dad got the position at some point when I was in high school. I want to say it was maybe a sophomore or a junior or something.
I think 08 was when he got it.
Okay, I was a freshman then, so good call. But he got it when I was in high school, and he did it leading up to him getting sick, and then transitioned into Josh doing it. So the positive to it is you had seen it day in and day out, but you didn't know how to run it. You knew the operational side of like, all right, if this is in the store, here's what I've got to do.
Yeah.
But from there, how big of a learning curve do you think that was early on?
It took a year. I almost quit because there were some weeks that I didn't make any money because I ordered way too much and I didn't sell enough to break even.
Yep.
And then that puts Josh in a bad spot too because we were both living on it.
Right.
So I remember him telling me one time, I was like, "Hey, you're going to have to figure out we're going to do something else."
Yep.
And I was in the school parking lot and I was like, you know what? I got to buckle down and figure this out.
Yep.
Because it was also his livelihood too.
Yep.
But
was you think that was an added pressure for you to like, hey, I'm doing this, but also like he's giving me this opportunity, so I've got to like make it work kind of thing?
I think I was just kind of relaxed by it, and
sure.
I just needed a kick in the pants. So,
yeah. Do you think that made you like nervous, or do you think that made you more like, all right, I got to take this kind of bull by the horns? Yeah, I got to figure this out.
I ain't gonna fail at something.
Yeah, I love that.
If I can prevent it,
right?
I mean, obviously, failures are a part of life, but
the things that you can control,
I could control that. Yeah.
Do you think that was a lack of knowledge and understanding of the business, or like you said, you were just comfortable for a bit, so you weren't paying as much attention to it? Like, what do you think led to you having to get to that point?
Probably a little bit of both.
Because how old were you then?
19.
Exactly. So that's the other thing to keep in mind here too. He's talking about all these things, but he's also 19 years old as he's going through this. He's not, 39. Not that, the extra 20 years makes you just a genius, but also like for a 19-year-old kid to be figuring out how to run a business, number one, but also like my brother depends on this also. Yeah. Like that's a lot.
Logistically, I mean, you got to figure out when you're supposed to be there,
yeah.
what you need, not run out, not sell too much that way you have a bunch of out of dates.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you've got this store's got this promotion this week. This store has these backdoor times and dates that you can and can't come in. This store wants to be serviced every day. This store wants every other day. And so there's a lot of moving parts there. When do you think, how long into doing it, like timeline-wise, do you think it took you to get a grasp on it and where you were like, I got this?
Like a good click?
Yeah.
Probably 2 years. And I mean, I know my business like the back of my hand now.
Right.
But it took every bit of 2 years.
And there's no textbook for that. There's no like, hey, you literally just have to get in the trenches and figure it out.
Because my route is totally different from this guy's route. Correct. He might have a bunch of gas stations, and I have all the big stores. We sell completely different things. The quantities are completely different.
The business looks completely different day in and day out.
I mean, my route is no comparable to anybody else's. Because the stores that I have, he doesn't have.
I think that's a beautiful idiom into anybody's professional career, whether they own their own business, whether they're self-employed or not. It's going to look different regardless if you're in the same industry to someone else or not. So you have to take the time to get good at your business, and that's why I think a lot of people, they'll spend a lot of time reading and researching and listening to people online and stuff, which is phenomenal. And I think you take those things, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to take those things, absorb them, and put them back into your business, because what may work for someone 3 states over doing the same thing, it may not work here, and vice versa. You know what I mean? And so that's the beautiful thing you said, earlier, being able to adapt is one of the key things, and you have to. because even as you're learning your business and doing the things that bring you success in yours, it can change too. And so you got to be able to be willing to jump in and learn and adapt and move on. And I think, from a high level conceptual standpoint, adapting has just been a part of our lives from, early teenage years on, with Dad passing away. How old were you when Dad passed away?
13.
13. So how do you think Dad passing away, looking back, changed the course of not only like your high school career, but like going into your early adulthood? How do you think that changed you?
Just had to grow up.
Yeah.
I was the man of the house then.
Yeah.
At 13.
Because I was gone playing baseball at that time. Josh had already moved out because he was in college and, going on doing his own thing. So we all had to grow up fast, but I think you had to grow up fast in a different way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was 18, so that's still growing up fast too because I'm 1,000 miles away. Dad passes away, and within, 6 days of that, I'm back 1,000 miles away, gone for the year. You know what I mean? So, like, you got to figure that out. You got to be able to control your emotions and go to work every day and not, fall into
a pity.
That's it. And that's one of the things that I think I've told 1,000 people, but I'll say it in this public setting, like, I respect about you the most, because you could have used that as a crutch to just be a jackass.
Yeah.
And continue that on through your adulthood. And to be able to walk into adulthood having that and do the things that you do and operate the way that you do, I respect you so much for that. You had to grow up quick. How do you think that helped you as a business owner, as a husband, as a dad, like all those things?
She made me mature. Like decisions that 18, 19-year-old typically don't have to make, I had to make. So it made me feel a lot more mature to do those things and go ahead and start my professional career and get out there and get going. I got married early, had kids early. So it just, all stages of it.
I think for one of the things that had helped me the most was, you have to make those decisions. You don't necessarily, like, obviously mom's there, but there's some decisions as a man you just have to make.
Yeah.
And so having made those decisions, it made me later on down the road, not knowing it, more confident to make decisions, to operate, to move and shake and do things, whether or not that ends up in a failure or not.
Yeah.
Would you say that, like, that's helped build confidence for you as time has went on?
Absolutely. And being able to bounce stuff off you and Josh too. That has really where I've got confidence.
For sure.
Because any idea or new move that any of us try to make, we bounce it off each other.
Yeah.
And we're going to be real with each other. So if it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
Y'all both know if you need the real answer to just call me. Because I ain't scared to give that to you. That's a fact. So
I mean, I am a little more sugar-coaty, but
I am not. So
no, you're not. But I appreciate that.
When they need a tough answer, they know whose phone number to dial, and that's usually mine. So going into, as you grow as a business owner, you get more comfortable. You get more comfortable with your schedule, all those types of things. You've jumped into side hustles like real estate. You've jumped back into doing, some electrical work at times. What do you think, aside from just, you want to continue to move the ball down the field for your family and grow financially and all those things, what do you think leads you to wanting to pursue those types of ventures on the side?
Just, I want to see my kids know that their dad does whatever it takes for them. Whether that's real estate or doing electrical work. I do electrical work because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I don't really do it all the time.
When he talks about obsessive personality, if you saw him do an electrical job, you would see that firsthand. Like the way that you analyze like pipes and the way that they come out of the wall and like they make these conduits, or I don't even know what terms I'm using, but like the way watching you do that is like, I don't know, it's like mind-boggling.
It's definitely an art.
Yeah.
It's an art. But
he's like going into restaurants and stuff, like looking up at the tops of the buildings and being like, look at that.
Wow, that's the first thing I do when I walk in there. I'm like, they got sucked.
So like, do you just enjoy so that one is because you enjoy it, right? So what makes you want to do this other stuff? Like, is it just in your mind? Like, is it just entrepreneurial driven? Like what pushes you to do those things?
Just to have something else of my own, to be like a true entrepreneur. I look as that as like not a hobby, but just extra. If I can keep doing that and do extra and build that up and build that up and build that up, then one day it's not going to matter what I do from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Start that early. When I get 50 years old, the goal is not to have to worry about money. And
that's a beautiful thing, and I think a lot of people can take away from that, especially young people, because if you take the time, like in your 20s and even 30s and 40s, because obviously that's still young, but if you take the time in your 20s and 30s to really find something that you like to do, that you're good at, that you can actually make some money doing, you can really start to separate yourself from your peers and those around you by taking the time, because so many people just waste time. They waste time scrolling, they waste time doing stuff that doesn't feed them or pay them or whatever the case may be. And not everybody wants to be some huge entrepreneur and be wealthy and all that, and that's cool. But creating a lifestyle for yourself that you can enjoy down the road, it's not rocket science. And I think a lot of people just over complicate what it can be. It can just be taking on a second job instead of just sitting at the house for those 3 hours. If you don't have anything else to do, like if you don't have a family, if you don't have a spouse, and
go do that.
Find something that you like that can pay you a little bit, and start to separate yourself so that later on down the road, when you don't have the energy to work 2 or 3 different ventures, you don't have to. You've put in the work, you've put in the time. And I think that's really where people really separate themselves early, is taking the time to do that. Don't go out to the bars on the weekends every single weekend. Like, take one of those weekends off and do something that pays you or something like that. You know what I mean? I think that's a beautiful thing that you've done from such an early age. Like, you compare yourself inevitably, like we all do, to what I've done, to what Josh has done, because, you've came behind us from a age standpoint, obviously, but you're so far ahead, I think, mentally and financially and business wise from where we were at the same age, that I think you don't stop enough to see what you've done. And Josh and I talked about not like resting in your successes and those types of things, which is smart, obviously, but I think you got to take the time to realize how hard you work, the good things that you do, you're doing the right things for your family, and that's really going to separate yourself long term. So
I just don't ever get complacent. That's why I try to always keep my foot on the gas.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to feel like, oh, well, I got this, I'm cool now.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't ever feel like that. So
I don't think that's a good place for anyone to be honest with you, regardless of what your work situation looks like or whatever. You should always be wanting to try to better yourself somehow.
If you work for yourself, it depends on you.
Yeah.
You get comfortable and complacent.
There is no one else.
No.
Like, if you don't
ain't nobody else going to do it for you.
That's it. If you don't get up and go service these places, nobody else is going to do it, which means you don't get paid, which means your family don't eat.
Yep.
So,
and they all depend on me.
Yeah. So from that, conceptual standpoint, it's easy to see where the motivation and the drive comes from,
That's definitely the driving factor.
For sure. But I want to say, before we shut this thing down, like, I'm proud of you. You're one of my best friends in the world. And I think that the world will continue to see more of you and what you do, and the great person that you are. But publicly, I want to tell you how proud of you I am, and I love you, and I appreciate you for being here. And is there anything that you want the people to hear or know that I haven't hit on, or something that's on your mind or heart that you want to speak to them?
I think we covered it all.
Cool.
I'm super proud of you, and you and Josh are my best friends, and love you all to death.
Love you. Thanks for being on. Guys, that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.